Good morning and welcome to Salford City Council Planning Panel. My name is Councillor Ray Mashter and I'm Chair of the Planning Panel. Given the pandemic, only elected members need to be present physically present in meetings to make decisions, and so officers of the Council can join meetings remotely. The planning officers presenting items today on this agenda are giving their submission remotely. We do have 3 officers of the Council in the room. We have James, what have I forgotten to say? We've got Mr Shuttleworth here. Sorry, it's been a very long August, I do apologise. We have Mr Shuttleworth here, who's lead officer for planning policy in the City Council. We have Mr Hodgson here, who's the lead officer for development management in the City Council. And we have our clerk, Miss Edwards, who's our clerk for our planning panel. Every other officer will be presenting via the live stream. So that's okay, thank you. Further, this meeting will be streamed live, as I've just said. If you do intend to photograph or film the meeting, can I just ask you that you do so in such a manner as not to stop other members of the public from speaking freely? That's all I ask. Further, my last request is that there is a COVID-safe protocol in place in this building. If you would be so kind to follow that, I'd be very grateful. Thank you. Okay, over to the order of business. First, the officers will present their submission to the panel. Second, any registered objectives will be invited to speak. Third, any applicants or applicants' agents will be invited to speak. Fourth, any registered ward councillors, MPs or MPs' representatives will be invited to speak. I'll allow a total of 10 minutes for both sides, so if that's 2 speakers, it's 5 minutes each. If it's 3, please divide again. And then ward councillors will get 5 minutes each, and MPs' representatives, etc. After then, I'll close from your good selves and open up the debate with the members of the panel. We'll solely focus on material planning grounds against the aims of the City Council's local and planning and the government's national planning policies. Final decision will be made on material planning grounds by inviting the members of the panel to vote. If there's a motion contrary to officer recommendation, then before any vote is taken, a senior officer will be asked to advise the panel of the merits of that motion. The Chair will vote along with all the other members of the panel. In the event of a tie, I, the Chair, will have a further casting vote to determine the application. I hope that's clear. Ladies and gentlemen, decisions we've made today, those decisions may or may not please everybody, but I'd like to feel that you feel that when you leave this meeting, that you had a fair and equal hearing throughout the whole of the proceedings. Thank you so much. Okay, members, are you happy to include parts 1 and 2 of the agenda? No problem. Just find the correct order. Is there any declarations of interest to the items? Councillor Cusack.
I'd like to declare I'm the Governor of the University of Salford, and there are a number of applications that have gone through under delegated powers for the University of Salford.
Thank you. Okay, should we do the apologies for absence first, and then we'll ask Miss Edwards to read out who's present. Miss Edwards, the apologies, please.
Apologies have been received from Councillors Birch, McCusker and Warmisham. And would you like to read out the members present now, Chair?
Yes, please.
Present today we have Councillors Bob Clark, Phil Cusack, Jim Dawson, Stuart Dickman, Karen Garrido, Jane Hamilton, Neil Reynolds, Peter Taylor, Phil Tresidern and yourself, Chair. 10 members.
Thank you, Miss Edwards. Thank you so much. Okay, members, are you happy to approve the minutes from the previous meeting held on the 29th of July? Okay, thank you. Okay, members, this morning the first application to be heard will be item 5B on the agenda, which is a deferral from the previous meeting. It's pages 25 to 33 on your main agenda and it's page 2 on your amendment sheet. Mr Catley, I believe you are the presenting officer?
That's correct, Chair.
No problem. I believe that's your front header sheet. Could you go forward a screen and back a screen?
Problem.
Yep, that seemed to work. So, Mr Kelly, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. This application seeks planning permission to change the use of 40 Kennedy Road from a 3-bedroom dwelling house to a 5-bed, 5-person house of multiple occupation, together with a single-storey rear extension. Officers may recall that this application was deferred at the 29th of July panel to enable officers to investigate further the number of HMOs along Kennedy Road and the immediate area. So first I'll provide a brief refresh of the site and the proposed scheme. The application property is a mid-terrace dwelling located on the eastern side of Kennedy Road and highlighted red in this image. It sits within the ward of Weaston Seedley. You can see that the immediate area is residential in nature. The M602 is located 300 metres to the south, whilst Buell Hill Park is a 400-metre walk away to the north. These are some pictures of the site frontage, with the application property highlighted by the magenta arrow there. And this slide shows the existing layout of the property, which provides 3 bedrooms at first floor level. So planning permission is sought to convert the existing dwelling into a 5-bed, 5-person HMO, and that will be facilitated by an extension, which I'll just bring my pointer up. That's shown at the back there. It's a single-storey rear extension. The proposed accommodation will be split across 2 floors with a communal kitchen diner located in the centre here, and then 2 further bedrooms at ground floor level. The first floor will provide 3 bedrooms. All of the rooms are conventionally shaped with adequate circulation routes and space for furniture. The size of the rooms complies with the council standards for a HMO of this size. These are the proposed elevations showing the proposed rear extension. And again here, the extension is considered to have an acceptable impact on neighbouring residential amenity. Sufficient space will be retained within the rear yard area for the storage of refuse bins away from the street scene. So this plan follows a further review by the council's HMO team, which is also referenced within your late information reports, including the proposed development. 23 of the surrounding 219 properties shown would be in use as HMOs, which equates to 10.5% of the available properties. Of these, 8 would be located on Kennedy Road, which amounts to 12.7% of the properties along this street. Officers remain satisfied that the scheme would not lead to an over-concentration of HMOs in this part of the city or negatively impact on the overall mix of dwellings in the area. 8 letters of objection, including a representation from Councillor Wade, have been received in response to the application, with the principal concerns raised by residents summarised on page 28 of the agenda pack. No objections have been raised by consultees, including the Local Highways Authority. Conditions have been recommended to secure obscure glazing to a secondary bedroom window on the side of the property and to ensure that the HMO is not occupied by more than 5 residents. Overall, it's considered that the proposed HMO would make a positive contribution towards meeting the housing needs of those requiring lower cost accommodation. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions listed within the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Thank you so much. Okay, Miss Edwards, I don't believe we have any objectors registered to speak today,
That's correct, Chair.
nor any applicants, agents,
No.
and no ward members.
No.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members, the previous application was deferred in order to enable officers to investigate further concentration of HMOs in the surrounding area. That was our resolution. We came to that very quickly on in the debate, and I did promise Councillor Dawson that when we revisit this application that we would start from the top, because we came to the determination very quickly that we didn't think that we put the picture of information on the concentration of HMOs in the area wasn't quite adequate to what we were being told by the members of the public at the time. We want the officers to go away and do further investigation, of which they've done and come back. So for me, it's a totally straight view again at this application. So is there any members wishing to speak? Councillor Clark, and then got Councillor Cusack. Anybody else? Councillor Clark.
So, do we know how many more HMOs are in the area? Do we have a map with the dots on?
Mr. Catley, if we could field that map again of the concentration of HMOs in the area.
Right, so there's a lot, isn't there? And that was our concern last time, there was a lot in the area. As you know, I'm not in favour of a family dwelling being turned into a HMO. You look at the room sizes, this is no way people should be living in this day and age. It's just a hotel room, and I can't support it again. It's just, I can't support a family dwelling. We're told all the time that we need family dwellings, and there's another one disappearing. We've got the places for everybody, or places for nobody, as I now call it, saying that they need family homes. And sorry, I can't support it again.
Yeah, and unfortunately we have an inspectorate out there, as we can see on this agenda today, from page 124 to page 129. It's very clear that, you know, there's a need for this product, and that, you know, even if you come under our guidance, it still adequately sizes from an inspectorate's point of view. I can see your frustration. I can, but
Yeah, it's not, I'm not here to discuss the inspectorate. I've no interest in what the inspectorate says after when it goes to appeal. I'm here on our planning panel, and it's my opinion and my view. I'm not going to base my judgment on an inspectorate's decision.
I'm not asking you to, but what I'm asking you to see is the world out there, is that's how the inspectorate's judging decisions. And I really would take into account and give weight to what an inspectorate says, because an inspectorate can inform council policy, and so you should care, to be honest. Councillor Cusack and then Councillor Guido, you put your hand.
Thanks, Chair. I think it's very interesting to observe this map of the number of HMOs in the area. Did I hear correctly that the report said that there were 8 HMOs on Kennedy Street, and I can only see 7 on the map? Is that correct?
I can come in there, Chair. So the reference to 8 includes the application proposal, which you can see in the red line there. So that was an assessment based on, if this application were to be approved, this is what the picture on Kennedy Road would look like.
Thanks. And are these registered HMOs, and do they include any HMOs that have now been introduced into the registration system that are over 3 people?
Yes, these HMOs are on our system. I believe only one of them is a mandatory HMO, which is the sort of the larger size. But following a further review of our system, yeah, that's showing up these 7 that you can see along Kennedy Road there.
Thanks. And my final 2 points, Chair. It would be useful if we could once again have these starred maps included with the report. We have had them in the past when members of the panel are actually looking at these reports and trying to digest them. It's very helpful to understand these density figures beforehand, and I think it's also worth noting that many of us have expressed concern about changes in the character of neighbourhoods as a result of the density of HMOs, and that as a local planning authority, we're going to be re-examining that issue in October. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. I've got Councillor Green, and then is there anybody else who's got a hand up?
Thank you. Just a couple of points. The first point is, if there's going to be 8 HMOs on this road, and let's say 2 people in the houses have got cars, where are they going to park on this road? I can't see anywhere else for them to park. So we are going to be in a situation where parking is going to be a problem. We always have problems with parking, and there's always a bit of a to and froing, but this is putting a concentration of, let's say there's 3 in each of the houses. That's going to be quite a large amount of cars. But my main point is, and I need to come back, and I'm sorry, Chair, that you and I are going to disagree on this. I'm elected to represent the people of Salford, even though I'm elected for Worsley. And the people of Salford in this notification here, including the ward councillor, one of the ward councillors, right, are against this development, another family home being used as a HMO. Now, we've got hundreds of flats in this city. Now, if developers are building expensive flats, we should be telling them to build flats for people who want to live in a flat. This is not a flat, this is a room, and as my colleague said, this is a hotel room. And in fact, I've been in larger hotel rooms than this. I just feel that whatever the inspector thinks, and that's his right, and I know that we need to abide by that, but I cannot, in the best will of myself, right, actually make a decision because I'm frightened that the inspector will actually reroute it, look at it. I have looked at the one, the 100 and odd page, whatever it was, last night, and I'm sorry I don't agree with him. So I'm really, really sorry, but I cannot vote for this HMO. I think it's far too many on that road. I think it's not fair to the people that want to live there. And I'm just sorry, I'm just dead against this one. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Green, I think you're looking for disagreement where there isn't disagreement, by the way. So, the thing is with the inspector also, in that latest edition, seems to feel that there's bedroom police out there, and has put a condition on there, limiting the amount of people that are allowed to be in that house at any one moment in time in the bedrooms. How you enforce that? Yeah. So, you're looking for disagreement where there isn't disagreement. My frustrations are very much real, but you do have to give weight to what an inspector is saying. As we've seen with Monton Road in the past, with our decisions, the inspector ended up informing our planning policy in the city through overturns. And so, you know, there's an example there, and it's frustrating, but it's there. And it would be amiss of me as my duty as chair not to point out what the world around us and is thinking about our decisions. It would be amiss of me not to do that.
Yeah, I accept that. Thank you.
Okay, members of the chair. Councillor Dickman.
Thanks, Chair. One was a point which was just mentioned then, was how can we enforce that only 5 people are in the property at any one time when, you know, we're effectively saying that none of them are allowed to have partners and have people stay over. How can that even be enforced? Because effectively you could be making it that there's 10 people there, even if they just have partners. But the question I wanted to ask of officers, from looking at that map, is there a threshold on that map of when there would be too many HMOs, where, you know, when would they say there's too many? Because even just looking at the bottom right hand corner, where pretty much, you know, 4 out of 6 houses from this looks like there's HMOs. You know, is there a threshold that officers are going to be telling us at some point that that it is fine, that there are too many, or could the whole street become HMOs? That's the question we're asking.
At the risk of sounding flippant and with the most ridiculous answer, it seems to be that it's a feeling. So, Mr. Catley, would you like to answer Councillor Dickman? I didn't say seems to be.
I shall do my best to answer. I mean, in terms of sort of is there a threshold? As Chair has alluded to, that I suppose the short answer is no. There could be a barometer introduced, but I think that would risk applying a sort of a one-size-fits-all policy to areas which sort of vary differently in character, and where, you know, for example, in some places 10% might be deemed to kind of have a very significant impact on a character of an area, whereas in other areas there might be the perception that there's a bit more sort of capacity in the local community and feel better able to kind of accommodate a higher figure than that. So I suppose, in short, it is a judgment. Moving on to the question around enforceability of the suggested condition in terms of number of people that can occupy the property. It's very much people who are residing there on a full-time basis. So you know, partners, friends would be able to stay over on a limited basis, but there would be a planning judgment required if it was deemed that people were sort of using the premises as their principal residence, if you like. In terms of enforceability, we would rely to a degree on sort of neighbours keeping an eye on the situation if they felt that people were kind of more people were living there than the condition allowed. If we got reports of that, then that's something that we would investigate.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Councillor Trisden.
I don't have a huge problem with it, to be honest. I think if our policy says if you fit these criteria, then if any applicant that comes to us whose application fits that criteria, and we throw it out as a panel, then our policy isn't consistent. And that's the problem with the policy, and not the panel. And it feels like a big waste of applicants' time and the panel's time to be judging those things here. That doesn't seem like a massively dense area. There are much worse areas in Salford, much denser HMOs in them. So I don't have a huge problem with it.
Thank you, Councillor President. Our policy here for a reason, maybe. It's £10 fine to Salford last couple of days. Councillor Cusack.
Thanks, Chair. I'd just like to go back to the comment that I made that I think we recognise that there may be a need for policy change here, and that we are going to re-examine that policy in October this year together. I think the second point is I think we need to recognise as a planning panel that this is just not enforceable. In terms that it's not enforceable in terms of numbers of people living in an HMO, because nobody is going to inform on somebody whose partner is sharing a bed with them, and I think it's crazy to even suggest that is something that we can enforce in any way, shape or form. So I think we've got to accept, Chair, that if we're granting a permission for a 5-room HMO, that potentially it's an HMO for 10 people. It's not necessarily going to be an HMO for 5 people, and there's very little we can do to prevent that.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Members, I've heard a very good balanced debate about this application. I haven't heard any resolutions on the table. There's the officer's recommendation. Is anyone willing to move the officer's recommendation? Yes, to approve the application. Are you happy to move the officer's recommendation, Councillor President?
I would approve it.
So it's been moved. Is there a seconder for the officer's recommendation? Okay, I'll second the application. Members, is there any resolutions against the officer's recommendation? It's not good practice to vote against an application with no resolution on the table for such being against. Okay, so we'll move to the vote. All in favour of the officer's recommendation, please show. Any abstentions? 6. Okay. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, the application has been approved. Thank you so much. Okay, moving right on to the next item, members. Item 5A, which is page 15 to 23 of your agenda, and it's page 4 of your amendment sheet. Mr. Catley, I do believe you are the presenting officer.
I am, Chair. If you just bear with me, I'll bring up the next presentation.
No problem. Okay, Mr. Kelly, I can see your front screen. Could you go forward one and back one? Yep, and can I hear you yourself again?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me loud and clear?
You have the floor. It's item 5B again, members. It's page 25 to 33 on your report, and page, it's page 15 to 23 on your report, and page 4 on your amendment sheet. Mr. Kelly, over to yourself.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks planning permission to convert 48 Cecil Road in Eccles from a 3-bed dwelling house into a 5-bed house of multiple occupation. The application site is located on a terrace street just to the north of Barton Lane. The property is 2 stories in height and benefits from its own front and rear yards. As you can see from this aerial view, the site, which is shown by this red marker here, is within a residential part of Eccles. Both the town centre and Eccles Recreational Ground are a short walk away to the east. A couple of photos of the application site. This application is seeking consent for a change of use only, and therefore there are no external alterations proposed to the property. You can see the rear yard area in the picture on the right hand side, which would accommodate refuse bins and cycle storage. These are the existing floor plans on the left and the proposed floor plans on the right. The housing standards team are satisfied that the size of the bedrooms and communal areas comply with the council standards for a HMO property of this size. Future residents will benefit from separate kitchen and sort of dining living room areas. A condition has again been recommended to limit the maximum number of occupants residing within the property to 5. These are the elevations. As I say, no external alterations are proposed as part of the application, and all habitable rooms will be provided with an outlook and adequate daylight using existing window openings. This plan shows the number and location of existing HMOs within the blue line, with the application site outlined in red just there. It follows a further review by the Council's HMO team, which is also referenced within your late information reports. Including the proposed development, 10 out of the 282 properties shown within the blue line would be in use as HMOs, which equates to 3.5% of the properties. Officers are satisfied that the scheme would not lead to an over-concentration of HMOs in this part of Eccles or impact negatively on the overall mix of dwellings. 23 letters of objection have been received from 20 address points. Letters of objection have also been submitted by Councillors Mullen and Boschel, with the latter summarised within your late information report. The issues of concern that have been raised are summarised on page 17 of the agenda pack, and again within the late information report. No objections have been raised by consultees, including highways. Overall, it's considered that the proposed HMO would make a positive contribution towards meeting the housing needs of those requiring lower cost accommodation. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions listed within the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Thank you so much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I do have 3 objectives this morning. Mr. O'Meara, Mr. Forsyth and Mr. Jimison. And on the supportive side, I've got Mr. Ahmed, Miss Mia and Miss Ula. Can I just ask, on the supportive side, are you the applicant's agents? Oh, no, fabulous, okay. So, is everybody wishing to speak? If you could raise your hand if you're wishing to speak, I want to make sure everyone gets the appropriate time. I've got you, Councillor Mullen, no, I won't forget you. Okay, so I read out at the beginning, it's 10 minutes for both sides, and so if you divide by 3, you get 3 minutes 20 by my math. So I don't like 3 minutes 20, so should we go for 3.5 minutes? Is that okay? So everyone gets around about a good time. Is that okay? So I take the objectives first, and then I take the supporters, or the applicants, agents, etc. So who's going first, gentlemen? Well, please come forward, sir, and take a seat at the chair. We'll find out who you are, and we'll get moving from there. There's 2 silver buttons in front of you, sir. If you could just press one of those buttons, and there's a tube of hand gel if you so wish.
Morning.
Good morning, sir. If you could tell us your name, I'd be so grateful.
Yes, my name's Mark O'Meara.
Okay, thank you, Mr. O'Meara. Mr. O'Meara, just to help with the context for members of the panel, would you be able to tell us where you reside? So we can...
Yes, so I live directly opposite the premises.
Right, thank you so much. Okay, so you get your 3.5 minutes whenever you're ready. I'll give you a shout at 2.5 minutes to help time yourself. Is that okay?
Thank you. The original proposal was for a 6-bedroom property, which was withdrawn. That particular case was 36 objections, actually caused 69% of the households within Cecil Road objected to that, were so concerned. Second application attracted 23 to 20 objections, which equates to 44 of the residents still not happy of the actual proposal, which is a significant amount. The Article 14 direction that Barton's located in is about impact of HMOs in the area. The council have got 2 policies of that, H1 and H10, I believe, and crucially the council have indicated they do not have a threshold for the amount of HMOs that can put in the properties around the area have a significant impact. To my knowledge, informally, there's between 8 to 10 HMOs, irrespective of the actual diagram within the area. Using Salford's Article 4 direction rules, they're going to allow, they could allow up to 18 HMOs on Cecil Road of 28% before they think it will have a negative impact. The residents quite clearly, 69% of the residents clearly thinks that breaches Article 14 direction, similar to the actual arguments before with Kennedy Road. It has a negative impact on the actual area, and we believe at that particular point in time it should not be allowed. It's recognised HMOs are a valid point within the city for housing. Traditional HMOs were large Victorian premises that could easily accommodate HMOs. They had the infrastructure, they had the parking, and it had no negative impact, i.e. Monton Road and Ellesmere Park. Small houses like this in Cecil Road were traditionally family houses. They may have been converted to student accommodation who live in a family group with social interaction and get on quite well. That market now has been dried up with the universities. They're buying their own type of in-house sort of domestic dwellings for that, shared houses within. These houses now are starting to be used for units that have no social interaction whatsoever. They live as single independent units in what is akin to one bed, which is totally inappropriate. Salford housing should actually solve the problem of inadequate housing. I'll take that as it is at the moment. Well, I'll give that to my colleagues.
Okay, no problems. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. The microphone's on, sir, and if you so wish, there's some hand gel there to wipe your hands with. Is that okay? So if we could just know your name.
My name's Graham Jimison.
Okay. Hello, Mr. Jimison. Mr. Jimison, if you could just help context for your submission where you reside, it just helps members understand your...
I reside at 39 Cecil Road, which is just a couple of doors on the opposite side down from the property.
Thank you, Mr. Jimison. Mr. Jimison, Mr. O'Meara used a minute less. So the next two speakers get 4 minutes each. Is that okay? I mean, it's 10 minutes for both sides, so the same will happen for the support side.
So we have previously spoke to each other. We're focused on different areas. My area I want to focus on is the community cohesion. HMOs. One of the panel mentioned about parking. Parking is an issue on Cecil Road without the addition of more cars. It is identified that the parking is within planned, but the date they were looking at was from 2011, which is now 10 years out of date. I've done a quick count, and there are 32 cars from the top section of Cecil Road alone trying to park on a space where a lot have got disabled zones allocated, restrictions on parking for access to alleyways and driveways. And a lot of the HMOs are making use of the parking facilities on Cecil Road to park for their, because they can't park on Barton Lane, which is having a knock-on effect. Neighbours are falling out with each other because they can't park. Parking is tight, cars are getting bumped into, damaged. And I notice on the map that they show on the screen there, you're focusing on 3 streets of Eccles. That, if you look at the wider area around Eccles, there are many more HMOs. If you just do a simple search on the internet for, my mind's gone blank at the moment, but spareroom.co.uk, yeah, that's what it is, spareroom.co.uk. There are many HMOs in the area that are, it's becoming saturated. And as somebody pointed out, there is a shortage of family homes. This is not a family home. Okay, this is for the individual people. There are also 3 developments on Barton Lane for flats and apartments for people designed for that purpose. My other concern as well is that houses of multiple occupation often are associated with the negative aspects of society, And currently we have experienced the negative aspects of society with drug dealings from the HMO that currently resides on Cecil Road. And that's caused considerable upset to the neighbours, and especially the one which resides directly next to 38 Cecil Road, which is called HMO. The other aspect that I'm concerned about is the fact that the landlords do not care for the properties and how they look. I've been around and taken photos of some houses which I know are HMOs, and they don't look nice at all. They're not keeping the upkeep, you know, the gardens are not kept. Seriously overgrown properties at the front and rears, which again has a negative impact on the community and the cohesion, and starts causing unrest and upset between neighbours. I'm going to leave that with there. Thank you.
Okay, good morning.
Where you reside, I'll be most grateful.
Yeah, I live on 23 Cecil Road, which is about 15 houses down on the opposite side of the road.
Thank you, Mr. Forsyth. Mr. Forsyth, your 5 minutes, and I'll give you a shout at 4 to help time yourself.
My neighbours have covered obviously a lot of the points, so I'm going to concentrate more on the social aspect. I moved into the property about 20 years ago. Many of the neighbours that were already residing in the street, so it's an area where people generally don't move from due to the size of the houses and the good community spirit that we've got. Although it's been pointed out that this would only represent 3% of that area within Eccles and Barton that you've looked at as HMOs, the more HMOs that are allowed to be developed increases over time. So my fear is that Cecil Road will, because of the size of the houses, will eventually become one of these areas, which erodes the family values that we have within the area. Parking has been raised, but it is a significant issue. It's obviously, most houses have around 2 cars per household. We're already suffering because of, as Jim has mentioned, that the HMOs on Barton Lane, there's significantly less room to park there because it's a major through route, are encroaching onto Cecil Road. Cecil Road is also used as a rat run. There's been a new development of houses opposite Cecil Road, where New Haven Industrial Estate used to be, and more often than not we're seeing cars travelling down our road on a regular basis, just cutting through. More cars parked on the road are just going to create more issues, especially for children. It's also been mentioned about the upkeep, and it is significantly obvious that the HMOs that are currently on Cecil Road are not looked after, and do have a negative impact on homeowners in the area. My concern as well is that the more HMOs that appear on the road, the more difficult it would be if I did want to sell my house later, because it makes it unattractive for people to move in and make it a family home. Converting them into HMOs as well creates a problem for any future buyer. Although you've mentioned on this case that the kitchen and the dining room would be left as is, you're still splitting up bedrooms that would have to be put back, possibly off-put.
No, I didn't cut you off. You have a minute and a quarter left. So.
Okay. That pretty much covers it from mine.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, go on then, Mr. O'Meara.
Thank you.
Over to your good self.
Just on a final note, obviously we've had a number of councillors, Councillor Mullin objected to the application. A significant amount of residents on Cecil Road have objected to the application. It means there's actual social interaction between the neighbours which you want to keep. The planners have looked at the appraisal on 2011 information. Irrespective of the appraisals, I think really, like it's been mentioned before, we need to take a grip of this type of HMO. It's a bedroom, it's too small, they don't social interact, it has a clear negative impact irrespective of what's been said today on the residents of the existing property, and we believe that under Article 14, we should embrace Article 14 direction, not just guidance, not just rules and things like that, look at what it's doing to the residents, which people over here have actually expressed, and unfortunately they're under rules and what they have to what they can say. The residents of Cecil Road do not want this HMO or any other. We're at saturation points. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Meara. Thank you very much. Okay, 10 minutes for exactly, gentlemen. Okay, I'll move on to the supporters side now. Is that okay? Who's going first? Okay, madam, please come forward. The microphone's already on. We do have some alcohol in the tube. So just wash your hands.
Just press this button.
It's on.
Oh, it's on, okay.
Now, if we can find out your name, that would be great.
So, my name's Sahana Mia.
Yep.
So, I'll be speaking on behalf of my mum, Shazna Mia. She sends her apologies that she can't be here today, unfortunately. She's got COVID, so she's having to self-isolate. So, I'll do my best to try and represent. So, like I said, my name's Sahana. I'm an ophthalmic practitioner at Manchester Eye Hospital. With me today, I have Shazna's niece, Saida, and her son-in-law, Jahid. So, together we'll just be doing our best to represent our case, okay? I'd like to just give you a little bit of background information, firstly, about my mum herself. And I feel like we have to do this because we've read a few comments on the website next door, and we've come across a few objections and comments regarding the application for 48 Cecil Road. Now, to start off with, my mum, she's a full-time care worker, and she's raised 5 kids, and together we're quite a strong family. We're all quite professionally able to look after a HMO as a family. So I'm an ophthalmic practitioner, my sister is a qualified solicitor, my other sister is a radiographer. So if there was to be any problems that arise with the HMO, I just want to kind of put that confidence forward that together we would be able to support any residents of Cecil Road and support my mum herself if there was to be any complications that arise. She works as a support worker. She's got quite a lot of experience dealing with people, vulnerable people, and she's quite passionate towards helping people. So this idea of a HMO has really come to kind of support people that don't really need to, you know, have a full house to themselves, and can help them to live somewhere that's safe and that's nice to live in. So some of the objections that we've come across, my Saida will be covering them for you, if that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, just one more after me. Okay, brilliant, thank you. Thank you. Brilliant, thank you. No, no problem. My name's Saida Ullah. I reside in 34 Aldridge Street, so it's still in Eccles. Yeah. So I'll be just covering some of the objections which were made, and a big one which was parking. And parking is a general issue everywhere. For example, you know, on my street, every household has at least 2 to 3 cars, and compared to a HMO where people really cycle and don't use like public transport. But Shazna has understood these complaints, and it is a valid point. So she'll be providing like a cycle rank at the rear of the property, and providing like cycle lockers and things like that as well. So not only will this encourage the residents to cycle, it will also sort of ease the pressures of the car parking on the street. So the second objection was noise, and she has also understood the noise issue, and due to it being a HMO, we will be soundproofing the walls. And if it was privately rented, we wouldn't, soundproof the walls. And a 3-bed property, as 48 Cecil Road, it would usually go out to family, most likely with children. So we can almost guarantee that there will be noise and we won't be soundproofing it. So if anything, HMO causes less disruptions to the neighbours. It will be individuals rather than full families with children. I'd like to also touch on the current HMO on Cecil Road, and there were comments about it, being reports of illegal activity. The previous house did have issues with the police, but who's to say if you privately rent it, you won't have the same sort of problems. So to overcome this, we will be, with anyone, we will be performing background checks on the residents. But there were also comments made that, a HMO will interrupt the sense of a family sort of community. But we don't believe HMO residents should be labelled as people that that don't belong in family neighbourhoods. Myself and my sister were fortunate enough to, work close by and live from home, so we don't really need HMOs. But, like a lot of our colleagues, many of our colleagues value and appreciate HMOs. So, yeah, the ultimate aim is to provide a suitable and comfortable accommodation for these people who don't necessarily need to privately rent, and not to turn it into a sort of student accommodation. There were also reports of the property being in a bad condition, and this is just a prime example of the judgment towards a HMO, because this was actually privately rented for as long as Shazma's had it. So the people who were privately rented didn't respect the property itself, hence why it's at the condition that it's at today. With it being a HMO, it will be fully refurbished. The individuals will all be responsible for their own area, so it will be easier to maintain and it will be in a better condition than what it is right now. So I'd like to just pass it over to my brother-in-law. Thank you.
Sorry, I won't take too much of your time. 7 minutes. Yeah, no problem. Oh, no problem, sir. Okay, so my name is Jahid, as mentioned. I will be summarising the key discussions mentioned in today's panel. We would like to thank everyone for putting their objections forward in order to make sure that we do the best for the area, and hopefully, because as we have to love and respect our neighbours, as the property that we applied for HMO is literally the street next door, basically, next to us. So therefore, we appreciate and respect everyone's values and opinions. So thank you, first of all, for putting forward your objections. Upon analysing the objections, we have summarised the majority of comments towards HMO. The majority of comments towards the HMO application are just based on assumptions and very stereotype comments. For example, noise, parking. These are not real facts or guaranteed issues to actually raise on HMO properties. For example, on my street where I personally live, every single household has 2-3 cars. Some even have 4, and there's a HMO property on my street which has 5 people living in there, and not one of them have a car because they don't have families and so on. So that's and obviously I understand. Obviously, based on assumption, people may assume that just because it's HMO that there's going to be more cars, more noise, and so on. But these are not real facts. I understand, and like, as I said, thank you again for obviously putting forward your objections. Unfortunately, people do tend to look at the negative sides around HMO before looking at the positive. And I do feel as though if you did have kids that lived in HMO properties, you would see the broader picture and realise that there are more positives towards HMO, and the positives do outweigh the negatives. We hope in general we have been able to portray the benefits of a HMO and answer everyone's objection in the most respectful way. I would like to end with an article by the MEN, by the Manchester Evening News, that was only done in December 2020, which is not too long ago. I will quote exactly what it states. What it states is around 6,000 households, and these are not individuals, there's 6,000 households which are currently looking for council housing in Salford.
most are waiting for a single bedroom, but more than 200 people apply whenever affordable apartment that size becomes available. So that quote alone is just enough evidence on why a HMO should be approved and needed in the area. Not only to be approved, but it also should be something that's promoted in the area, simply because there's many people that are seeking such houses and accommodations. I hope overall this panel has helped ease the negative thoughts and towards our respected neighbours that they may have towards the HMO application, not just for our sake, but for a positive future of Salford in helping accommodate individuals with affordable housing. Once again, obviously, thank you for listening and sharing your opinions. And again, once again, we hope we help. You guys understand our point of view also. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Harmon. Is anyone coming back? There's a couple of minutes. Is that okay, ladies? Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for all your submissions, members of the public. I'm sure members of the panel will take into consideration what you've said. Councillor Mullin, I'm going to take you for yourself first. Councillor Lancaster is going to come in on the Teams meeting. We said we're going to bring Councillor Lancaster in and mute him for now. Okay. Okay, Councillor Mullin. Yep.
I've already did that.
You know the drill. You've got 5 minutes, Councillor Mullin. It's great to have you.
Thank you.
Over to yourself.
Back again, like a bad penny here, aren't I?
If you're not careful, we might charge you council tax in that time.
Okay.
So I think you're living here.
Okay. Start now. Thank you for allowing me to speak, panel. Quite simply, Cecil Road should be refused. This, quite simply, is overparked. As a local resident and a councillor, I drive up and down and drop leaflets on these streets, and basically Cecil, Pleasant, Gaskell, all the way down to Fairless Road are pretty much parked side to side. It's got to such an extent that if you're driving down and the car's coming the other way, it's a Mexican standoff, somebody has to reverse out. So the assertion made that there's adequate parking can't be right. It seems to be detached from the reality that I see every single day on these streets. Let me put that further into context, okay, is that currently we're going to spend several £1,000s from our budgets putting right parking issues caused by additional HMOs and 3-4 houses with, cars. £3,000 to £4,000 doing junction protection on every single one of those streets. That is currently with legal to do the notices. We've saved money because, fortunately, as somebody pointed out, we've got several hundred new, it's not City West now, 4 housing, affordable flats all along Barton Lane, and we're going to have to use Section 106 monies from that to, guess what, put the parking right on Trafford Road. Okay, and it got that bad at the last transport meeting. We were looking at £30,000 to £40,000 to put in one-way systems across those roads between Trafford Road and Barton Lane. That is how bad it is. This is not a perception, this is a reality that's discussed, and those documentations are available to the members of the panel. We've got the feasibility studies and everything available to us. But quite simply, we can't afford it. We don't have a £40,000 budget to put these parking and roadway corrections in. I mean, Barton councillors welcome a good mix of housing, but we're now struggling with HMOs and apartment conversions in this area. It really is causing an issue. We do have multiple disputes. We're having car wars, parking wars. There are ASB emanating from HMOs specifically. I wish I could say that's not the case. You could argue that there are 1 or 2 houses with ASB, but they are not on our radar at the moment. The numbers you've got as well for HMOs in the area, I don't actually think it's correct. I mean, a Google search on there for rooms and stuff will definitely turn up more than you've got. So I would like to ask for a further check. I mean, I know I spoke to officers that we are currently trying to round up all the landlords. We've got landlord regulations in there, they should be registering, and we know they're not turning themselves in. We're going to go after fight them. So I think the data is not quite right yet, and I'll come back to that issue later on. So I'd like the officers to check on that, yeah. Okay. Really, this is the best we can do for our young men. We've got, as I say, we've got brand new bills. I get it. I understand the desperate need. I've got families coming to me as a councillor, begging me to find a family home so they can be close to their community networks of support. And I can't help them, even in the private sector. You know, so the mix is not quite right. I don't think you can win the argument whether, you know, the feeling is, should it be more housing or whatever. I think it needs a good coat of looking at, and I welcome the fact that we are going to be discussing this in terms of putting some hardcore policies around it, because we need to. There's no doubt.
You've got a minute left, Councillor Moore.
Thank you. With the best will in the world, HMOs are causing breakdown of communities in Barton and Winton at this particular time. So, I've got a minute, I've got to be quick. So, in summary, I ask you to refuse. If you can't find it in your heart to refuse on the parking and the bins issues, then I ask for deferment while we double check the data for the area. And if you then decide that you wish to approve, well, I would like to add a further condition. We need £40,000. I would like £40,000 from this application to help pay for some of the issues in the area. I can't see any other way, but thank you for your time, panel.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Thank you so much. Okay, Councillor Lancaster, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear, Councillor Lancaster. Councillor Lancaster, you have 5 minutes. Is that okay? I'll give you a shout at 4. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Over to yourself.
Well, can I first of all start off by saying that I did write in with my objections along with Councillor Bottle's objections, and that wasn't mentioned in the feedback which the officer gave. First of all, on one of the issues we raised was the parking. And I've got to significantly say that in Barton, and I should say I live on Barton Lane and Ashburn, corner of Ashburn Road. I'm well aware of the issues of parking in the area, and it's quite. You don't leave your car at night time to go anywhere, because if you did, when you come back, you won't find anywhere to park. That's how bad it is. I use the parking, so I've parked further up the road, Barton Lane, to actually, and I'm disabled, so. I really find it impossible, the parking which we've currently got. My main objection is the loss of family housing. It's wrong of the officers to portray that this meets the criteria of the council housing policy or lettings policy. Yes, it does. But what we've got to recognise is the need is for family housing. That's our main need. For a Salford Council. We do need flatted accommodation, and we've got flatted accommodation. And I've got to say, Barton and Winton, which is a joint ward, has got more flatted accommodation than anywhere else in Eccles. We've got majority of multi-stories, we've got low-rise flatted accommodation, so there is a significant amount of flatted accommodation. I wanted to actually mention in the area of refuse collection. One of my areas of responsibility in the council is environment and waste disposal. I saw from the plans which the officers showed, it showed the plan of the area and the photograph of the area, one blue bin parked in the yard. if you've got 5 properties, what are these planned? Is it going to be a recycled containers for the whole of the 5 people who are occupying it? Or are they each going to have their own bin? And we're going to have 4 bins per because of the different recycling elements which you have. You could have up to 20 bins in those backyard. Where are you going to put them? At the moment, there is a problem where bed sits in a number of occasions, and HMOs have been, that bins are left outside all week, and that's not acceptable. I want to actually mention the importance of waste, because the officers have never mentioned where the bin store's going to go. If you actually look at some houses, flats which you got on the top of Cecil Road, which is referred to, they've got a bin store which is nearly as big as the flats, which have had to be condition of the planning application. There's no mention where the bin stores are going to be in this particular area, and I think it's a relevant issue which should be considered by planning. I also want to recognise that nobody's having to go at the tenants here. What is clearly a view of mine anyway, is the thing I don't want to lose is sparse accommodation which we've got for houses within the area. There has to be a recognition. Surely when you build a new estate in anywhere in the area, you ask us for a property mix. When I asked of the council what property mix was in the area of Barton and Winton, how many houses, how many 2 beds, how many 3 beds, they were not able to give me the information. They haven't got that information. And yet they can give us a number of bed sits, but they can't tell us how many houses we've got. It's a real concern of mine that we're actually losing a number of houses without actually recognising houses is the 3-bedroom houses and 2-bedroom houses are the biggest shortage we've got, and family accommodation is critical.
You have a minute.
So I really wanted to emphasise to you, yes, we want to press for a change of policy and recognise that housing needs in the area should not look in the narrow area of just the 4 streets. We should recognise that there is a significant planting accommodation within Barton Winton. Not enough, but comparison to housing where the waiting list is significant. So to me the importance is recognise the need for 3-bedroom housing in the area, reject the HMO, and I'm not opposed to the individual who's made the application. I did speak to her at length about it and expressed my personal views, but did recognise that she's a good neighbour and it's somebody that we get on well with. So it's not an issue of personality, it's an issue that, to me anyway, 3-bedroom houses are a priority. And yes, we need 2 and 1 bed, but the important one is the 3-bed. And also, please do consider, if you're going to review it, review the housing needs of the area of Barton and Winton, not just 4 streets, and recognise and find out because I'm sure we find out in future, what the composition of 3 and 2 bedroom houses are in the area. Because we can't keep the sparsity if we haven't got the information which we need. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lancaster. You can carry on watching the decision via the live stream, Councillor Lancaster. Thank you so much. Cheers. Bye-bye. Okay, I don't believe we have any ward councillors registered to speak. Miss Edwards?
No, Chair, we don't.
Thank you, Miss Edwards. Okay, thank you so much for your submissions. Members, I'm going to open up the debate now. But just before I do, Mr Ketley?
Hello, Chair.
Yeah, could you just refresh the members about what Article 4 was, and also the data that shows where the other HMOs are in the area? I take it we've scraped as much data as we possibly can, but I understand that this area isn't a selective licensing zone, so you don't need to register your HMO in this area with the authority, whereas you do in other areas of the city. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. In terms of the Article 4 direction, that was introduced, I believe, in 2018 for this part of the city, and I suppose sought to remove permitted development permitted development rights that previously stood that allowed dwelling houses to be converted into small HMOs without requiring planning permission. So that removing that Article 4 direction simply indicated that the council wanted the ability to review and monitor, and I suppose to a degree control the level of HMOs that were being introduced into this particular area. And that's why we have an application before us today. And in terms of the data, if I just shift across to this image here, yes, this is very much a kind of what we consider to be accurate data following a number of conversations with the council's HMO licensing team. So we would consider the data within that blue line in particular to be very much up to date. As you can see there, that's dated 1st of September, so it's up to date.
So we believe it's up to date information of what we can legally scrape.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Within that blue area, that's the kind of the deep dive area. We do have some data on the area around that, but that's just using the council's mapping system. But I think we considered that the area within that blue line there is particularly relevant, and sort of that's the relevant area to target to kind of consider the character of the area surrounding the application property.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gatley. Okay, members, go first. Is there any hands? We've got Councillor Clark, Councillor Guido, anyone else? Councillor Clark and then Councillor Cusack. Councillor Clark.
There's many things I don't like. I don't like the lack of detail on the plan. It doesn't show any furniture. The rooms seem to be odd dimensions. The upstairs bathroom, you can't open the door correctly. There is no communal bathroom downstairs, so visitors, if they had visitors, they haven't got a bathroom downstairs, or toilet I should say. It's lazy, because it's just taking a perfectly good family home, putting up some stud wall and putting people in it. And we've got to think of the people that we're putting in these, and I'll speak from experience here, because I spent most of my life working nights on the motorway, going back to a hotel room and spending 12 hours a day in rooms like that, and it's enough to drive you crazy. So I wouldn't want to do it, and I don't want anybody else to do it, and we need family homes. So yet again, I won't be supporting this. I just think it's not acceptable. We have to take into account the residents that already live there, who have invested their time, money in family homes and try to build a community, and these don't build community, so sorry, I won't support it.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I've got Councillor Guido and I've got Councillor Cusack.
A lot has been made about the parking, and I think we're all au fait with that. And Councillor Clark has actually mentioned about the room sizes. If I just take one room here, which is 6.9 metres square, a normal, well, you could put a single bed in, which is 3 foot, which actually leaves you 3 foot space around it, and probably 3 foot at the end. So, you know, we're asking people to actually live in these, and, you know, we've got one which is 7.6 metres, which is very, very tight as well. 8.5 is still not within our standard. I thought our standards was 10. And then the back room, which is 7.7. Again, if you were to put a bed in there, I mean, presumably we're going to be looking at single beds. I don't think so. I think there'll be double beds in there. So that's 4 feet. And I just find it incredible, really, that we're actually thinking that people can live in this sort of accommodation. And also about the bin stores, I don't see where the bin stores would go. If we could put the photograph up of the backyard, which might help.
Please,
I don't see where it is. Yeah. Right, so that bottom bit there will be the utility room, I would presume, the white bit will be the utility room, and then the small garden at the small yard at the back. So you're going to have 4 bins or one big large bin, and the blue bin and the green bin. So the purple bin, sorry, the magenta top. So I don't see how that's going to actually work, and who's going to put them to the front. I mean, unless they are empty from the back, I'm not sure. So I'm just very, very concerned about the room sizes and about people having to live in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greeno. Mr Kelly, could we just get some clarity on our guidance and clearly, I mean, I'm not going to please Councillor Clark with this, but clearly we need to give some weight and understanding to what the inspectorate said about our latest decision, which was very much about the amenities within a HMO, and that one was under our guidance. And then the inspectorate gave some weight to a guidance leaflet to landlords. And he seems to have given quite a bit of weight to that, even though it's not planning policy in our city, so it's just guidance. So, Mr Kelly, if you could just put me right on that, on what our guidance is, and do these rooms meet our guidance? Would you just give us some clarity on that? Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So the proposal does meet the HMO guidance, which sets out that for properties which have a dining room or a living room that is an addition to a kitchen, and for properties where they are proposing single occupancy to bedrooms and not double occupancy, it's acceptable for bedrooms to be 6.51 square metres and above. And in this instance, all of the bedrooms do achieve that standard. And the council's HMO licensing team have confirmed in writing to us that each of the rooms does comply with the guidelines set out in that HMO document, which, as you noted, an inspector recently gave quite a large amount of weight to as a useful tool for assessing the room sizes within these sorts of proposals.
Thank you, Mr Kelly. Very helpful.
Can I thank him for that? Because, as I say, on the one that we did on Kennedy, it was 10 metres square, wasn't it? Something like that.
Yeah, correct.
I just wondered whether that was the standard, but thanks for clarifying it. Thank you.
Councillor Cusack, and then anybody else? Councillor Hamilton, I've got Councillor Dickman, and I've got Councillor Dawson. And I just have to, I'll get you in better than. Councillor Cusack, who's going to say?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. My worry about this, and I take into account the car parking issues around the area. However, single dwellings occupied by families could typically have 3 cars per household anyway, and those streets just aren't designed for that kind of density of car parking, and there's no car parking provision to any extent within any of the curtilages that I can see at the moment. I think the point that one of the proposers made about us essentially not stigmatising either HMOs or the residents of HMOs is well made. I think we need to recognise that they are a valuable contribution to the urban fabric of our city, in that people need them, and we have low-income individuals who require this kind of accommodation. However, my main consideration, or my main concern, in common with a couple of the other councillors, Garrido and Clark, is the design of this property. We've mentioned design of HMOs previously where there have not been ensuite facilities, and where we're expecting residents of a room to go past other rooms to access toilets and washing facilities. And I actually don't find that acceptable. I'd also like some clarification, and I know we've had clarification on room sizes, but I understood, probably erroneously, that we were looking at room sizes generally over 10 square metres, and I know Mr. Ketley's said that, I think he said 6.5 square metres is acceptable, but I'd just like to know where I've got that 10 square metre figure from. I really think that the design of this particular conversion is not sufficient. I know we don't have a policy that supports en suites, but I do think it's unacceptable that people are having to go past where other people are living to access bathrooms. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Question. Thank you, George. A very balanced, very balanced set of comments. Thank you so much. Councillor Hamilton, I'm still absorbing them, so I do apologise. Councillor Hamilton, I've got Councillor Dickman and Councillor Dawson.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to echo what Councillor Cusack just said. I think there is a place for HMOs, most definitely. I think I echo again what you said before, and I think sometimes I appreciate what you were saying, Councillor Clark, in your hotel room. Then maybe, you know, you've got a safe haven somewhere else, your own home, to go to. But for some people, these HMOs are the safe haven, and that's the way it is. What I don't like about this is the density issue, and that's where I am. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Councillor Dickman, and I've got Councillor Dawson. Okay.
Thanks, Chair. Firstly, I did want to echo what Councillor Cusack said as well. First, I wanted to just mention about it's been mentioned in the application and in discussions about the character of the owner and the character of occupants of HMOs. As someone who's lived in a HMO for several years, with you know, it was fortunate it was 4 of us in a 7-bedroom property. So we had a lot of space, we had a lot of living space. We knew each other through work. It was a good living environment. People who live in HMOs, you know, aren't necessarily bad people. Like I say, I've lived in one, and I won't say I'm a bad person. But what I think is the issue I've got with HMOs of this time, unfortunately, is because of the space of it. They're not going to be people who know each other. And as we mentioned about them sharing one bathroom, I don't think, as Councillor Clark said, there's enough detail in the application on the rooms, on how they'll be living, compared with the previous application where there was a lot more detail. I think the rooms are too small for where they'll be living. I think it's just too cramped and too. I think the detail, there's not enough detail. I think I'd be hoping that our planning team could have maybe worked with the applicant a bit more to create a better application and more detail in it, working with them as to what would work better if it's a 4-bedroom HMO rather than a 5-bedroom. You know, converting one of the bedrooms to be a larger bathroom, putting in more individual bathroom suites into each room. That's where I think for me if our planning team was able to work more with the applicant to do something to bring it, it is going to be difficult in terms of our planning policies to being able to reject something like this, but I prefer to defer it to see if our planning team can work with the applicants to provide a better application, because at the moment I don't think it's there at all. I think the problem with the traffic and the parking issues are an issue, but even just looking at Google Street Map, the issue's already there, and I don't think having one extra HMO is going to severely impact that at all. I think it's already an issue, as Councillor Mullen's already mentioned, and we need to do something better as a city to improve that. I think it's, you know, it's not a fault of this application. I think it's already an issue anyway. But that's where my concerns are, is in terms of the detail in it, and whether we could work with the applicant to make it a better application.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. Thank you so much. I've got Councillor Dawson next.
Yeah, it's the information on the application. Regarding the size of the rooms, we've got the actual square meterage, but it obviously just over the 6.5. We've got the smallest room 6.9, 7.7. So there's several rooms under the 10 metre mark. Now, when we had the on the appeals decision on page 125, when he came down to the site to inspect, his comment on that report on page 125 is that he's looked at the council policy, but also he's considered the actual layout of the room. That's what he says in his appeal decision, and then he found that okay. Well, I've got no information to know whether the layout. Well, when I see 6.9 and I look at the very simple drawing we've got, I can see problems if the bed's in a certain place, or the wardrobe, or whatever other absolutely basic thing, because it will only be basic things in that room. But we've got no information on that, and I see real difficulty, besides all the other things what other members have said, about what's in the building in total, facility space, bin space, car parking, all that. So I'm not happy with this, and I think even with the appeal decision, it does say we should consider that. It's not just the 6.5 square metres, you know, we should consider the whole living room space and the building space. That's it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dawson. Councillor Cusack, Councillor Dawson, do forgive me, I was a bit of a mystery. Mr Ketley, you introduced to members that it's actually 6.5 metres, not 10 metres squared. Some members were working to 10 metres squared. Could we just clarify what that guidance is again, please? Of which the...
Yeah. No problem. So the 6.5 square metre rule here implies, in this instance, instead of the 10 square metres which we've applied, for example, as part of the previous application, that applies because here the applicant is proposing a living room or a dining room that is in addition to the kitchen. So in previous applications, you might have seen a sort of a communal kitchen diner provided as the single amenity room for that entire property. Here we've got 2 communal amenity rooms that comply with the standards, and therefore the requirements for the bedroom sizes aren't as quite as great as previous applications. So it's 6.5 square metres instead of 10 square metres.
Thank you, Mr Ketley. Totally cleared that up. Thank you so much. Okay, Councillor Cusack, you did seem to be getting towards a resolution there, but I didn't hear anything formal.
I needed clarification on that point before I made the resolution. Thanks, Chair. I would like to propose that we, and I'd accept the officer's advice on whether this can be deferred for a further consideration of the design, as Councillor Dickman suggested, or whether we need to refuse the application and on the grounds of inadequate design information, and also insufficient provision for the number of people that the building is providing for. I still think the points I made are valid. In this day and age, it's not, in my view, acceptable to have this kind of design with these kind of facilities and expect people to live in them permanently. Thanks, Chair.
Mr Hodgson, I'm just being very quickly about the merits of a deferral here. My gut feeling is we need to make a proper decision today, but Mr Hodgson, what's the merits of a deferral here, or what could there be?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, obviously, what you see before you is obviously room dispositions and shapes and sizes, and obviously you have seen previously drawings that show a single or a double bed or a wardrobe. I mean, obviously, I'm not suggesting you haven't got an imagination to be able to see how, you know, a single bedroom could fit within, for example, one of the bedrooms that's just over 6 metres. I mean, I think you can, I think, formulate a view in terms of whether you feel, as some comments have been made, where it feels a bit cramped once you consider all the accoutrements that will actually go into bedrooms or indeed dining rooms and kitchens. Because obviously, ultimately, the kitchen, it's just showing like a blank space. Well, we all know that there's going to be kitchen cabinets, sinks, tables and chairs. And I think if Mr Ketley could help me out here, when we come to look at room sizes, say, for kitchens, it suggests or would include, you know, units within that broad definition of allowable space. I think, Chair, this is enough before you where you could come to a decision, but it requires members to obviously use a degree of imagination, Chair, that, how they could see how a single bed could be accommodated in that room.
Thank you, Mr Hodgson. Councillor Cusack, are you putting a resolution on the table?
Yeah, I'm putting a resolution that we refuse this application on the grounds of A, insufficient design information, and B, an overdevelopment of the property. Of the internal property. Right, okay. Is there any seconder for that? Okay, there is one seconder for that. Is there anybody willing to move the officer's recommendation? There's one person to move the officer's recommendation. Is there anyone willing to second that? No. Okay, not at this time. Okay, members, it's been moved for refusal on the grounds of insufficient design information for the people that would be residing in the development, and also that it's the internal overdevelopment of the dwelling. When we propose to go against the officer's recommendation, we do need to bring in a senior officer on the planning, on the development management side to inform us of the impact any decision that we make may have. Mr Hodgson.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, having listened to all the comments made by members, and I think members are very clear on the current policy that applies to HMOs, and we've obviously got H1, which is our general policy about housing and providing a balanced mix of properties to satisfy a whole variety of needs. And I don't think anybody in the panel is suggesting that there isn't a need for low-cost accommodation in the city. It's just how, in this particular case, how it's laid out and what amenity is afforded to those residents. You've obviously understand there's 7, which is all about amenity of residents within the building and its impact on neighbours, and you've got the emerging policy in the local plan, which tries to put a bit more flesh on the bones in terms of how we would try and deal with matters of character and amenity, and these tipping points that we're struggling to grapple with in terms of when is the next one too much in a particular area. I just also draw your attention to the fact that later on this agenda, and I think you've all read the agenda pack in relation to the appeal decision we did have at 48 Delamere, and within that pack there's a paper on the cost application, which again I'm assuming you've read, and it does talk about the fact that members are obviously not duty bound to accept officers' recommendation, but there can be a risk of award of costs. But it's very clear, you've obviously read it yourself, where if panel fail to produce evidence to substantiate each reason for refusal, and if you rely on vague, generalised or inaccurate assertions about the proposal's impact, and which are unsupported by any objective analysis. Equally within that appeal decision, it recognises that the guidance issued from licences is guidance, and there's no adopted policy about minimum sizes, either in any of the document or indeed the development plan policy. So the inspector made it very clear in that decision it is a very subjective area, and it's at the gift of panel members to look at that in the round and come to a view, which I think the panel have been doing. So, Chair, in this case, clearly there's always potentially a risk of award of costs, but I have not heard anything today that suggests that, given the resolution that's been made, that there is a case for the panel to be able to substantiate this case should it go to appeal, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hodgson. Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Hodgson, I did hear that you mentioned DES 7 there, and I understand there's H1 as well. Is there some merits to if members were to, if members are to turn this application down, I always like to tease out every bit I can do to make sure the resolution is as strong as it possibly can be. So is there any merits to add the context of DES 7 and H1 in what to ask Councillor Cusack to include DES 7 and H1 in his resolution?
Yeah, I hope that's perfectly acceptable, Chair, in general, because H1 has got many facets to it that includes high quality residential accommodation. I think that's what this panel is striving to achieve. And then DES 7 is in particular about new development and the impact on the intended residents. So they're quite applicable, Chair, in this case. And anything in the emerging plan also, I think it is, Chair, in the report, we brought as well need be.
Okay, Councillor Cusack.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I accept those additions to the resolution. And I'd just also like to comment that in the application for award of costs that is in the agenda today, the planning practice guidance was referred to that advises that costs may be awarded against a party who has behaved unreasonably. And I don't think that in this case, Chair, we are behaving unreasonably as far as this design is concerned.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. So, Councillor Cusack, just to clarify, with your resolution, we'll add the reference with reference to DES 7, H1 and the emerging H10. I believe it is. Is that
yes, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Reynolds, so you happy to second that?
Absolutely, yes, I totally agree with what Councillor Cusack just said there.
Okay, Councillor Clark, no problem.
I can just make one comment that in future when these come before us, that the rooms are populated with furniture. So we can see, I don't think it's acceptable for us to use our imagination to try and work out what the room plan is. I'd rather see it in scale so we can draw a good conclusion. So we all are seeing the same thing.
On behalf of the officers, we'll ask in the debrief, but we'll do our very best. It's just there's government regulations dictate what you need to put in and what you don't need to put in, and often we get applications that put more in than they need to meet the line. So we can only ask for the regulation up to the line. So when we'll have a chat and debrief. Is that okay? Okay, members, it's been moved and seconded for refusal. I'm sure you're very aware of what the resolution stated. All in favour of that refusal, please show. Okay, anyone against that refusal? And any abstentions? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the application has been refused. Thank you so much for your attendance. Okay, moving right on, members. Are you happy to approve? Are you happy to note the delegated authority report? It has got 2 applications in there that were panel decisions. We are trying to find the ground in that, put them in. They will be ironed out. So, okay, happy to note it? Seeing lots of nods. Okay, and then planning appeals. ladies and gentlemen, if you do so wish to leave, then please do, because planning is a very dry subject and we're getting to the bits and bobs. Planning appeals, members, are you happy to note the report? I think we've had a good discussion throughout the two applications that we've heard this morning about the panel planning appeals report. And I believe the second appeal for the advertising hoardings, they'd already had permission through some sort of permitted development, and unfortunately the City Council would put a restrictive condition on there that shouldn't have been there, so they appealed it, and we just didn't defend it because it shouldn't have been there in the first place, so it's a bit of a nothing appeal really. Is that okay? Councillor Dawson, on the appeals? Oh, on the appeals, fabulous. Oh, we've got Councillor Cusack on the appeals too. Oh, fabulous.
I was amazed by the appeal because I like to raise the thing about fire regulations. And I'm always told it's just building regs. But the appeals officer brought in fire regulations. So where do I stand?
Currently you're sitting, so but I don't know.
Chair, I get that. Whether I misconstrued that. I mean, he mentioned it, but he said there are other regimes. Yeah, because he has, right. Planning inspectors, like... Yeah, but obviously, like this planning panel, if matters are raised which are not planning considerations, we will have to advise you whether they are or not. The inspector has to do exactly the same, or he or she could be at fault. So they have to recognise if matters are raised by third parties in relation to objections. So in this case, I think if I've understood it right, there's a whole list of issues around the landlord, the management of it and fire safety. They have to recognise it, but they then go on to say that there are other regimes that deal with that, and it's not for the planning system to deal with.
Yeah, you know, with the, I have some frustration with the request for costs as well, that the inspectorate suggested that there's a condition that can be placed in to regulate the maximum amount of people in the dwelling at one time, and that just seemed a bit out there really. I just don't know how. I don't know how the inspector would expect an authority to be able to regulate that and justifiably regulate it, to be honest. So, and there's seemingly requested that in every future HMO that we receive, that there has to be a condition in there to state how many people that can live in it. Otherwise, you're at the threat of costs, and it just doesn't. I think if we don't have the right of appeal to an inspectorate, but we might be able to send them a letter saying, asking them for further clarity of how they imagine that we could go about this thing that they want us to enforce.
And Chair, we can and have in the past gone back to the inspectorate to ask questions of clarity or indeed, particularly around say this condition.
Could we do that? I would be very grateful if we could, because maybe we're all missing something. That, Councillor Cusack, sorry.
The officers can correct me, but if I'm wrong, but I understood that the High Court was the final arbiter, and that if we really want to appeal against an inspector's decision, we can still have recourse to the High Court. Is that correct or not?
Chair, in some ways, if we're going to make some fights, I wouldn't fight over a HMO because it's going to cost you lots of money. I think, yeah.
I'm not suggesting we do that for a moment. I'm simply asking the question about the principle.
Yes, you can go to the highest court if they apply for leave to allow us to do that, yes.
I'm sure they would go back and review the decision and come to exactly the same conclusion once again. So, yeah. Councillor Reynolds, I do apologise. I've been looking this way and you put people there.
Like just in answer to Councillor Cusack, my understanding is that we can only go object on legal grounds,
yes,
rather than just and that would be all we could do for High Court, and it's not a cheap way of going about it either. There's quite a cost.
Well, I think we should write as planning authority to ask for further clarification of how we would go about this, how the inspectorate imagines we have the resources to do it, as any authority would. I think it would be quite enlightening for the other great Manchester authorities, as well as the authorities of the length and breadth of England and Wales, or wherever the planning guidance meets. Okay, so are you happy to note the planning appeals? Oh, sorry, Councillor, that was another point.
So, sorry, Chair. My other question was, or my question was about the display panels that are adjacent to the railway bridge. That was the other one. And it's how we measure luminance. Do we measure luminance on the basis of the design of the panels and their design output, or do we actually measure luminance in terms of measuring how bright they are? And I'm thinking about it in terms of enforcement, Chair.
Oh, I agree, because you know, putting LED lights in your house, the luminance is different when you look at it than what it's facing. It's, yeah, exactly. It's very difficult to turn the source down.
Our resident expert, Mr Stevenson, who was involved in this case, will be best placed to deal with that. I can't remember if Anthony's on this call or not, though. We can get that answer. I'd rather get Anthony to respond, Chair, rather than me try to make up.
Well, if it's not in an email, it'll be for the next meeting for less than the panel members to hear it, because it is a subject. We're getting numbers and numbers of LED advertising now across the highways, and it's definitely an issue. Okay, are we happy to note the appeals? I think we've really done our appeals report justice throughout the whole of the meeting today. It was really good, that. So thanks so much. Okay, Scott, we're going to end the meeting now. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. There is no part 2 and there's no urgent business. So thank you so much for your attendance. Scott, can you tell us when the live stream